In Swine Versation with Greg Hastings, Senior Director of Commercial Excellence with Neogen. Welcome, Greg.
Hi, Jim.
Thanks for everything you do in the industry. You're an expert on needle technology, so we wanted to bring an educational opportunity to our audience today on this topic. But to start, can you give a little bit of background of yourself and history with Neogen?
Sure. I've been with Neogen now. I celebrated my 17th anniversary June 1st, so I'm going on 18 years with Neogen. During that time, I've been in a variety of roles and positions, but I've always been connected at some level to what's happening with our needles and technology and injection devices. And that started off, years ago, from polyhub to aluminum hub to, even if you think a long time ago, there were durable needles that we reused. But probably 20 years ago now, Neogen got involved with detectable needles, and the first detectable needle being made. And one of the large pork processors came to us and said, "Hey, we've got issues with finding needles in the processing plant. Is there something you could do?" And we did. We took some designs, took some specs, made a needle that was designed to be detected at line speed in processors. So it helped to ensure that needles or fragments of needles would not end up on the dinner plate.
So what about specifically, if you can talk about the genesis of detectable needles in pork production?
Yeah, so we know that and the swine herd's varying, but let's say there's roughly 70 million market hogs in the U.S. anyway, and each one of those in a high health herd status gets roughly 5 injections. So you're looking annually at about 350 million injections happening in swine production per year. Now, most consumers aren't even aware that we inject swine routinely for pathogens and viruses that are of importance. So if and when they find a needle in a pork product, they assume that has been tampered with and that did not come from production, that was placed there. Now, I would probably, the incidents of that happening are very rare. No one knows for sure how often it happens, except for maybe processors. But it was a problem. So they wanted another level of safety built in that they could, remove any fragments and or pieces, parts before it reached that plate. So what we did was we developed a patented cannula. It was highly ferritic, being able to pick up at line speed in magnetic resonance machines to ensure that any needle fragment as small as 1/8 of an inch could be detected and removed. And we've enjoyed that for, like I said, well over 20 years. What's happened now is that level of detectability has shifted. They don't want it in the plant because anytime they find that, it shuts the line down. They have to close down, clean out, and they wanted to make sure that the needle and or a broken needle or a fragment never even reached the processor. So in the past few years, we've seen these processors say, "Hey, go ahead and tag out your pig. Don't even send it to the processor. We'll pay you for it. And, don't send us those animals." And, that led to extra labor, extra time, extra frustration when it comes to workers, because oftentimes they're going so quickly with these injections, they're not even sure, maybe perhaps which pig in a pen the needle broke off in. So we were seeing things like whole pens being, marked out as suspect instead of one pig. And or, the other thing that happens is oftentimes these animals are euthanized, and nobody raises pigs so they can euthanize a healthy, an otherwise healthy animal. So it led to some problems. So we said, what could we do to change the paradigm and or build a better needle? And that's why we came up with the D3X.
So this was over 20 years ago. So who first brought them to market?
Well, Neogen was the first one that brought those needles to market in the U.S. There had been some other companies that had tried, but they just did not have the durability or meet the demands of pork production. And it was a little different technology, and that was Canadian based. Over time, we did acquire all the patent rights and had, the full spectrum of detectable needles in-house with us. But the thing we did with D3X was we knew that these things were given multiple injections, and so they had to be durable. We couldn't have them bending and being straightened. So we made a thick wall cannula that made it quite durable. And it was designed so that if the cannula did bend and you tried to bend it back, it would snap and break. And so you would reduce the risk of it getting into the pig. We do know that that's the leading cause of needles breaking, is the constant bending and restraightening of needles. So, the industry did a couple things. They gave recommendations that, you shouldn't probably be giving more than 20 to 25 injections per pig. And that helped reduce the incidence of breakage. But then also by using the D3 needle, you have a more durable needle, and you were able to pick that up at line speed as well.
So what was the why, Greg? Why were they needed?
Well, again, I think it all goes back to consumer safety. Nobody wants to bite into a pork chop and find a needle fragment in there, or, whatever the cut may be. Because the other thing we know, and we've done extensive testing, that you can have, let's say you're injecting a small piglet with a 20 gauge needle. If for some reason, and you're following PQA guidelines, and you're injecting, just behind the neck, and that needle breaks off in there, as that pig continues to grow, that fragment won't stay right in that spot. It'll translocate, and then it could literally end up anywhere. So it's important to be able to detect it really in any cut of meat and or scrap, because, all parts are utilized.
So the D3 has been the industry standard for over 20 years.
Correct.
So what makes it unique? I know we've touched on it, but what's the simple term? What makes this unique?
It is the patented metallurgy, and in addition that it's thick walled. And the other point, which is important, is the point geometry. We use a little different point geometry to help reduce bending and burring of needles, which can cause abscesses. So, we really looked at the needle holistically, not only to design something that's detectable, but that also meets the rigors and demands of swine production.
What causes a needle to break?
Continual bending and straightening is the number one cause. The number two cause is using the wrong size needle for the job. And the number three cause is improperly trained vaccinators. Now, as we all know, labor is an issue at swine production, and oftentimes people change jobs, they get new hires, and even though it's quite intuitive to use a needle and syringe, making sure that you're giving the proper injection with the proper size needle, proper injector is very important at the proper place.
So if a needle does break during vaccination, can you walk us through what happens next?
Yeah, if a traditional needle breaks during vaccination, hopefully you realize what pig it is. You mark that pig very quickly, because hopefully you're marking them as being vaccinated, non-vaccinated. Put some sort of mark on there so you can come back. And then, like I said, either tag that pig out as a broken needle and send it to someplace that knows how to deal with them, or depending on weight, certain operations have a protocol that they'll euthanize that animal. But again, most often that's done after they're done vaccinating, because they're going through barns, pens quite quickly, and they don't want to slow down. So as long as it's marked out that pig is suspect, they can come back and, according to the farm's protocol, take the action that's needed.
So you're in the midst of a new product launch. You're going to launch a new detectable needle called the D3X. So why the need to change and improve upon something that's already been successful?
Over the years, we were continually getting questions. Was there a way to detect this or have it show up in pigs at the farm? Is there a way we could say, hey, I've got a pig of 20 some pigs. I'm not exactly sure which one it broke off on. Is there any way I can, figure that out here? And the answer was no. It was never designed to do that. It was designed to be detected at line speed and magnetic resonance testing devices. So what we did with the D3X was we took the standard characteristics of a D3 needle, the thick wall, the unique point geometry, and the cannula, the highly ferritic cannula, And then we coupled that with what we are calling a highly visible extraction collar. And I know it's a little hard to visualize, but we put a little collar on there with, it's plastic that's highly visible. And as the needle bends, it's got legs on the collar that will actually flare out, so the operator knows that cannula has been compromised, it's been bent, probably need to change the needle. But also, if for some reason that breaks off, this collar is beyond where the needle typically will break off from the cannula hub juncture, and it will prevent that needle from going subcutaneous into the skin, and it'll leave those fingers sticking out and flaring out so you can actually see it in the pig. And at that point, you can just literally pull it out. So there would be no additional labor needed, no mark out, no tag out. You pull the needle out and that pig's good to go.
And you presented this at AASV?
I did.
Okay. So you guys,
it's one of those things, after you see it, you're like, man, that's so simple. Why didn't you do that a long time ago? And, you know, the technology wasn't there. It's hard to do this stuff in mass manufacturing. You think about manufacturing of needles, the technology needed to catch up. The manufacturing technology needed to catch up on how to apply this. So once we figured out how to do it, it's one of those things that looks so simple. It's like, this should have been done a long time ago. And I think it's very intuitive. Once you, it's one of the few products that we have positioned to producers that as soon as they see it, they get it. You don't need to do a lot of explaining.
So when you talk about explaining, there's a visual component to detectability. So
there is now, there didn't used to be.
Okay. So what does that mean? How can you explain that to our listeners?
It means that if you're going real fast and that needle broke off and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know where it went, you're going to see that plastic extraction collar sticking out of a pig. And it's visible enough that anyone should be able to pick it out of a pen. Even if the vaccination crew's gone, the next day the workers come through, they're still going to be able to see it and remove that needle. It's not going anywhere.
Okay. Now, is there a website other than neogen.com that our listeners can learn more about the D3X detectable needles?
To date, it's not. I mean, right now, Neogen is the only place where we can go and talk about that. It is a patented needle right now. Again, because of supply issues, we've had a little delay in getting this out. But once we're fully out with it, you know, we'll have several areas where people can find more information, whether that be through a distributor, whether that be through a veterinary site. You know, there's a full marketing plan to go out with that.
Yeah, I know we met at World Pork, Greg, and we're doing kind of a summary of the World Pork Expo. And I thought this would be a good final note here. How was the World Pork for Neogen? What was your take home from the event?
World Pork was good. It's always good in a post-pandemic world to meet people and see them face to face. As far as an industry show, I think it's interesting because the swine producer population is getting smaller but larger. So, you know, I think the future of all those shows is a bit questionable as opposed to where it's been in the past. I mean, historically, you'd always go to some place like that and see what's the newest, latest, greatest thing. Not saying that doesn't happen, but more often than not, as the industry consolidates, we know the key players and we're approaching them in a variety of fashions and not relying on just World Pork Expo. But, you know, as far as when the world's able to all get together, it is a very nice, convenient place for you to meet international customers as well as those located here in the U.S.
We really appreciate you educating us on needle technology, Greg, and look forward to the launch coming up.
Great. Appreciate your time too. Thanks, Jim.
An in swine Versation with Greg Hastings, Senior Director of Commercial Excellence at Neogen.